Behind the glitter of modern South Korea lies a world of mystery and fear. In this video, we'll tell you about the most terrifying stories, legends, and real-life events that still haunt people. The horrors of South Korea. The Hwasun serial killer case. In 1986, a series of crimes began in the small town of Hwaseong, south of Seoul, which for decades turned into a real nightmare for all of South Korea. The first victim was a woman whose body was found in a field. Soon new victims appeared. The killer acted extremely carefully and left almost no traces. His victims were women of all ages, whom he attacked at night during the rain or in deserted places. The police launched the largest investigation in the country's history. More than 20,000 people were questioned, thousands of suspects were tested, and a huge amount of evidence was collected. However, the case remained unsolved for years. Because of this, legends began to emerge around the killer. Some believed that the criminal had connections with the police or even possessed special knowledge that helped him avoid punishment. A special atmosphere of fear was created by the fact that the attacks often occurred after the same song was played on the local radio. Because of this, people began to believe that the killer was giving special signals or had his own ritual. Each new crime increased the panic among the population. Women were afraid to go out after sunset, and the city gradually turned into a place of general fear. It was only in 2019 that modern DNA technology was able to identify the killer. He turned out to be a man named Lee Chun-jae. By that time, he was already serving a life sentence for another crime. The Hwaseong case became the basis for the famous film Memories of Murder and is still considered one of the most gruesome cases in the country's history. Mrs. Park's house is one of Korea's most famous ghost stories. Among the many Korean legends, the story of the so-called House of Mistress Park occupies a special place. This story originates in the Gyeonggi province in the middle of the 20th century. According to legend, a wealthy woman named Park lived in a large house with her family. After the mysterious death of her daughter, the villagers began to notice strange things. At night, footsteps could be heard from the house, and a child could be heard crying, although there was no one inside. At first, people thought it was just a rumor, but over the years, the stories grew. Some visitors told of a female silhouette in the second-story windows. Others claimed to have seen a little girl dressed in white who suddenly disappeared before their eyes. Particularly eerie was the story of a local watchman who allegedly heard a child's laughter in an empty room. Over time, the house became a place of pilgrimage for lovers of mysticism. Some television programs conducted night experiments there. Although no evidence of the existence of ghosts was ever found, the atmosphere of the house made a strong impression even on skeptics. Some researchers believe that the story arose from a combination of local legends and a real family tragedy. Today, the legend remains popular in Korean culture. It has inspired horror films, TV shows, and books, and while no one can say for sure what happened in that house all those years ago, its story still gives many Koreans goosebumps. Yoo Yong-kil, Korea's most violent serial killer. In the early 2000s, Seoul was gripped by fear over a series of brutal murders that remained a mystery to the police for a long time. The main suspect in the case was Yoo Yong-kil, a man who is now considered one of the most dangerous serial killers in South Korean history. His crimes began in 2003. At first, he attacked wealthy elderly people, breaking into their homes under cover of night. Later, his victims became women who worked in the sex industry. The incredible cruelty of the criminal caused particular horror. He carefully planned his attacks and tried to hide his tracks. For a long time, the police could not understand whether the crimes were connected. Rumors began to spread in society about a maniac who hunts people throughout the city. Some newspapers even compared him to the most famous serial killers in the world. When the criminal was finally caught in 2004, the public was shocked by his confessions. He said he hated rich people because of his own failures in life. According to official figures, he is responsible for at least 20 murders, although some investigators suggest that there could have been more victims. During interrogations, he behaved extremely calmly, which only enhanced the eerie impression. The Yu-Yong-Kil case became a symbol of the dark side of the modern metropolis. It showed that even in the safest areas of a big city, a dangerous criminal can operate for years. This story later became the basis for documentaries and the popular Netflix series, The Raincoat Killer, Yeonfiendo Island, and The Legends of the Ghost Fisherman. Dozens of small islands lie off the west coast of Korea, many with their own mystical legends. One of the most famous is Yeonpyeongdo. For centuries, local fishermen have told stories of strange figures that appear in the mist above the sea. According to legend, these are the souls of sailors who died in storms and never returned home. These stories became especially popular in the 20th century. Local residents claimed to have seen silhouettes of boats at night, which suddenly disappeared among the waves. Some fishermen told about mysterious voices that supposedly called them by name from the darkness. The strangest thing is that such stories were told by different people who did not know each other. In Korean folklore, it is believed that the souls of those who die at sea without proper burial may remain between worlds. This is why special rituals were often performed on the islands to appease the spirits. Some old temples still preserve objects associated with these rites. Although there is no scientific evidence of ghosts, researchers note that thick sea fog, strange wind sounds, and the island's isolation can create unusual optical and acoustic effects. However, even today, many locals do not like to go out to sea on certain nights, especially during heavy fog. These legends have become part of Korean culture and have inspired numerous horror films and paranormal television shows. For many Koreans, the stories of ghost fishermen remain some of the country's most terrifying maritime legends. The Frog Boys case is Korea's most famous disappearance of children. On March 26, 1991, 5 boys from the city of Daegu set out to look for frogs near a local mountain. It was a normal spring day, and their parents were not worried when their children went for a walk. However, they never returned home. The disappearance instantly became one of the most high-profile cases in the country. Police, military personnel, and thousands of volunteers combed the forests, hills, and water bodies. A huge number of witnesses were interviewed. However, no convincing traces were found. Due to the lack of evidence, various theories began to emerge. Some believed that the children had been kidnapped, others spoke of an accident, and some even suggested a mystical explanation. Almost 11 years later, in 2002, the boys' remains were accidentally found near the place where they disappeared, but even then, the case was not finally solved. Some experts believed that the children could have been murdered, while others spoke of a tragic accident. The debate continues to this day. Due to the huge public outcry, the story was dubbed the Frog Boys. It became one of South Korea's most mysterious criminal cases. To this day, many people are convinced that the true cause of the tragedy has never been established. The story has inspired films, books, and documentaries, and even decades later, it continues to give us goosebumps and remind us of one of the country's most painful mysteries. Korean legend of the ghost of the girl in red. There are many ghost stories in Korean folklore, but one of the most famous is that of the so-called girl in red. According to legend, she is the spirit of a young woman who died a tragic death and could not find peace after death. She is believed to be seen late at night near old roads, abandoned buildings, or in forests. According to folktales, red clothing symbolizes strong anger and a desire for revenge. That is why in Korea, there has long been a belief that a person should not be buried wearing red clothing. Otherwise, their spirit may return to the world of the living. For decades, reports have surfaced of people claiming to have seen a mysterious figure in red. Some witnesses said it stood in the middle of the road and stared directly at them. Others claimed that such encounters led to strange events and nightmares. Of course, no evidence of the ghost's existence has been found. However, the legend has become so firmly entrenched in the culture that it has become the basis for numerous horror films, TV series, and books. Even today, many Koreans know the story of the mysterious girl in red. Brothers home a secret horror camp in South Korea. In the 1970s and 1982, South Korea was actively preparing to show the world the image of a modern and successful state. The authorities sought to remove homeless people, orphans, people with disabilities, and anyone who could create a negative impression of the country from the streets. It was then that an institution called Brothers Home began operating in the city of Bizen. Officially, it was considered a social assistance center, but the reality was much more terrible. Thousands of people were incarcerated there against their will. Some were simply picked up off the streets. Others were detained for minor infractions or even for no reason at all. Inside the facility, discipline was brutal. Former prisoners spoke of beatings, forced labor, starvation, and torture. Many were forced to work long hours without rest. According to eyewitness accounts, people regularly died from exhaustion, disease, or violence. Some of the deaths were not properly documented at all. Some researchers call Brothers Home one of the darkest places in the history of modern Korea. All this went on for years, and information about the events practically did not reach the public. Only decades later did former victims begin to speak openly about their experiences. Journalistic investigations revealed the scale of the tragedy. For many Koreans, it was a shock to learn that something like this could have happened in the country for so long. Today, Brothers Home is often called the Korean concentration camp, and historians are still trying to establish the full number of victims. This story was a reminder of how dangerous systems can be when they operate without societal control, and even today remains one of the most shameful and horrific pages in South Korean history. Among all the abandoned buildings in South Korea, it is unlikely that there is a place with such a gloomy reputation as the Ganjeom Psychiatric Hospital. The institution was opened in Gyeonggi Province in the second half of the 20th century and operated for many years. However, after its closure, the building began to be overgrown with terrible legends. Over time, it began to be called one of the most mystical places in Asia. According to one legend, the hospital closed after a series of mysterious deaths of patients. Another version claims that the director of the institution suddenly disappeared under mysterious circumstances. Although none of these stories were officially confirmed, rumors quickly spread across the country. Paranormal enthusiasts began visiting the abandoned hospital in search of evidence of ghosts. The most famous legend was about room 402. It was believed that the door to it had been locked for many years, and that terrible events had taken place inside. Visitors reported strange noises, footsteps in the empty corridors, and silhouettes of people in the windows. Some of these stories may have been fiction, but the atmosphere of the building really made an eerie impression. The hospital became known to the world in 2018 after the release of the horror film Ganjeom, Haunted Asylum. After that, the number of tourists and bloggers trying to get inside increased dramatically. Today, the building has been demolished, but its story remains one of South Korea's most famous urban legends. Thanks for watching. If you want to see the second part with even more creepy mysteries from South Korea and other countries, don't forget to like, subscribe to the channel, and write about it in the comments.